Dead. Who sent you? You did. Terminator 2 Judgment Day. Los Angeles, California, May 10th, 2014, 17:49:05.
Daddy, save him!
If not for that still on repeat, Anwar might have enjoyed the drive. Shasti and Freya chirped and burbled the whole way. Itsy bitsy spider, they sang from the back seat, or some other song they learned from Astaire, classmates, somewhere. Anwar never touched the car radio, but sang along too, adding his own nonsense, if harmonic, doodahs. That got the girls laughing, and soon they were teaching Anwar the finer points, so detailed, of their own harmonic, nonsensical three-part invention. What touched Anwar and worried him, too, maybe, was just how easily he slipped into this kind of rapport with his two girls. No worries at all, so relaxing. Like he was one of them, three were one. In the rearview mirror, he found us once familiar, eyes familiar, expressions familiar, gestures, as if they were his own. Even how they retold their fantastical story, which they had spent the afternoon mapping out all over their bedroom, including forays into the forbidden territories of the hallway as well as the shared bedroom shared with Xanther, which they couldn't resist sharing with Anwar, came out in little bits, qualified, requalified, redetailed, revised, posing no trouble at all for Anwar to follow or join in with, because it was so in sync with the way he thought, even the way Astaire thought. And Anwar discovered himself easing into himself. Then, that was the feeling. What a feeling. Breathing deeply. How had he been breathing before? And forgetting. He did not know what, except save. Even that, for a while. Maybe it had something to do with how their oddness in the eyes of others mirrored Anwar's sense of otherness among friends. Their manners in duplicate, triplicate, answered oddness by making of each other someone not so alone. These darling children of his, they could make of any time a home. And in no time they are in Venice, the three of them crouching on hands and knees in the gray mist, if not so gray, or almost white, a blinding almost white. Then surely a dazzle of rainbow. Untied, is it still raining? Anwar had nearly gone back to the element to retrieve his sunglasses, and this was with the sun hardly visible, the origin of this light impossible to locate. Here, along this street, where Xanther had stretched moments into an infinity. Here, where Freya and Shasti, eyes of eagles, find in seconds the broken bits of their sister's glasses, lenses scratched but somehow still whole, only the frame splintered. And that's that. They head back, singing again. Anwar puts on his sunglasses. They head to Silver Lake, stop at the pet store, to pick up extras, by way of a gesture.
So to keep making of an isn't an is?
The owner, something, Casey, glowing at the sight of the girls. Weren't you beauties here this morning? Then, following Anwar's confirmation, a curious look. Wasn't your wife shopping for a dog? Then home. Easy. As if clocks didn't count. They left to retrieve Xanther's glasses and pick up some extras, and they succeeded on all counts. Perhaps perfect, if not backgrounded by, if not for so constant, so...
Daddy, save him!
Something's up with Mom, Xanther says instead, if not smiling, beaming then like white, peculiar fog outside, when Anwar and the girls return. Anwar finds Astaire in their room, unmoving atop their comforter, lights off, a tight curl of discomfort. What can I do? Sitting beside her, resting gently, a palm on her shoulder. Make me laugh, she whispers, or really a peep, like something Freya and Shasti might make. I think that the owner of that, what is it, Urban Pet? Urban Tales, Grez Casey. I think he was flirting with me. Astaire starts to cry. Honey, Anwar tries. It's nothing serious. There, a hint of a laugh, the tiniest of smiles, lost in a shuffle. To think I thought he was flirting with me. Astaire is doing her best. More of a laugh. More snuffles, too. And then more tears without snuffles or laughs, along with the tiniest of breaths. Darling, there was nothing I could do. Xanther found it. I don't know how, in all that rain. And Anwar still isn't saying everything. How can he?
He can't even tell himself.
The vet said there isn't much we can do. She very kindly went over with Xanther everything that was required, but she also pulled me aside to warn me about how something so young and small, without its mother, is unlikely to live out the night. That's sad, too. Astaire sits up, just to turn on her bedside light, which, by a click, reveals just how much she's been crying. Eyes not just red, puffy as blisters, and only getting redder. And then she's showing him something else, pale brown, with upper left-hand corner a familiar Santa Barbara address, plus a name he's written out on more than one check, Oceana. What's more, the manila envelope is open. The paper's out. Underneath, there's the title page, if familiar, also marred. Hope's Nest, On the Necessity of God, by Astaire Ibrahim. Even if the red mark circled to above God over Hope's and Nest is for all it clearly states unreadable. Might as well read F, which the accompanying letter clarifying the circled incomplete pretty much goes on to state. Somehow Astaire rallies for dinner, the red miraculously gone from her eyes. Puffiness too, though what's left is not even calloused, but too sad for Anwar to name. Obviously, already though, is how little time Astaire has given her own disappointment self. While brown rice bubbles beside black beans, declaring their creamy readiness, while Astaire, dully, dutifully, prepares a peach papaya salad with thick tufts of fresh mint, plenty of lime juice and ground pepper, always the perfect amount of lime, while Shasti and Freya set the table, Xanther, dutifully, excitedly, shows off all that her mother has helped her with. The many sterilized bottles carefully arranged, feeding tubes, formulae, hot water bottles, and, last but not least, a safe haven adjacent to washer and dryer, so he won't wander and hurt himself. Wander? The thing is barely alive. Though the cardboard used as a barrier is flimsy, won't do. Anwar has Xanther wait by her charge, as if she had any intention of ever leaving the overcushioned nest. Hovers so close to occlude any view, maybe the creature isn't even there. Ha! While Anwar goes to find some wood scraps from their guest house, which, though 2 stories, is presently suitable for only ants and spiders, if that, and a few cheap tools from China, some storied boxes of forgotten content, better chucked if their mystery weren't so heavy, along with hardened paintbrushes, also better chucked, plus oily paint jars and too many half-empty cans of turpentine, engine oil, and gasoline. He should plan a chucking hour tomorrow. The plywood, he retrieves, is dry and clean. Xanther approves. Now her encampment is sturdy, absurdly high too, an excellent defense against both egress and ingress. Encircling an absurdly large dog bed with a small box in the middle, once holding his new Nona tea drive, now stuffed with warm hand towels, to swaddle, there, Xanther's beaming, devotion, covering angles of all confrontation, though why Anwar shouldn't need confrontation now? Why even think of confirmation? Like some penitent? And yet, still, that uncanny sensitivity. Mom, are your allergies acting up? Though Anwar, as he and Astaire wash the dishes, cannot detect in her eyes the slightest trace of swelling or irritation. Just a cold, honey. Are you feeling a reaction? Anwar still has to ask once the girls are in bed. Not an easy task, considering the squalls Xanther had put up when she learned that, 1, in no way was this new creature sleeping in her bed. Animals don't sleep with people. Anwar sounding sterner than ever before, as if those words were never his own.
Only at the end of Forever Owned.
And 2, There's no way Xanther will be allowed to spend the night downstairs in the mudroom, her resistance and reactions exhausting them both. No, and I don't have a cold either. And yet, despite these cold tones, they still end up making love. The sex comes on without premeditation, even desire. No talk of the paper or the day's ill-fated gathering. Just Anwar's fumbling reach to assure with a touch, a good night shy of kisses. Click of the light. Except instead of sleep, this attempt to make of the day's unexpected events, and now their darkness, something less important, even pleasurable, his reach, always Anwar's, coming upon neither interest nor rejection. Lights back on, hers only, which afterwards, despite pleasure mutual, feels like his insistence, and so, too, a lifeless exercise in friction and exertion. At least she isn't crying. At least he isn't crying. At least they both now seem of one mind, relieved. Anwar still loves how Astaire, before reading, first goes to the bathroom to lightly wet her feet in the tub, so with knees up her feet won't slide on the sheets. As Astaire disappears into a book, the music of turned pages. What book should she choose? Anwar remains on his side, eyes closed, afraid for some reason. But Astaire won't speak up to ask him. How can she know to ask? And waiting, and waiting.
What happens to happen is such tricky passage.
For this drowsiness, this emptiness, to at last deliver him unto something untethered and dreamt and elsewhere. Even a nightmare would do. But nothing other than this nightmare comes of it, not even drowsiness. Maybe hovering nearby, but no closer. Afraid, too, to reach out and turn off his thoughts. Thoughts? More like a to-do list. Dermatology and asbestos and the nose. Mila, Forge, Astaire's folks. Mephisto, the psychology of machines, a love letter to Cynthia. Mephisto was 27, a copy somewhere. More sublime music of time. Why is Shasti eating butter salt sandwiches? When has Anwar ever felt this bound and lumbering? Bulk word, reiterated, encrypted, uncoded, lost, remediated, rebranched, halted?
Where's the dog? Astaire, please. I knew I should have gone with you. We never even made it to the trainer. She saved him. Actually, this is no good. I'm allergic. You are? You have to take it back. She saved him. Actually, she brought it back.
What Anwar still won't say, hardly to think.
Cannot stop thinking about.
Downstairs in the living room, Anwar finds the unopened champagne, restocks their fridge, drains the bucket in the kitchen sink, ice long gone, slosh not even cold, then pads through a bloop dark somehow leaking into shadows.
Never silent so long as they remain denied.
Not that Anwar managed to depart from their room without a word.
I don't want to be numb, she had whispered from the shadows, bluest of blues. And Anwar had come around the bed then and kissed her on the lips, her beautifully warm lips. What will we do? She asked when he reached the doorway. The check didn't come through. I can see that. The bad news, love, he answered, is that she'll never be numb. Could she see his smile in that? Xanther had to get her gifts from somewhere. Would he see her smile in that? Anwar held on to the notion that Estician still might have called or emailed, left some message with news of much money, what the bank had yet to know. But even after all, 3 screens went bright with desktops, revolving stars, exploding stars, and he had riddled through inboxes and spam folders, too many folders for too many counts, all max. Anwar discovered no confirmation. At least he has plenty to answer his sleeplessness with, the night's outlook aligning with the intimate ambitions youth only knows as itself, with what experience knows is striving, what maturity accepts can come without results, but what perhaps wisdom understands may still play a part in some larger purpose, however out of reach. Since 50, that crying year 49 actually, Anwar has watched his own needs evaporate completely. By 54, not even a residue of his own volition seemed to remain, faintly taking precedence over personal wants. Except when Anwar codes, tapping that music and math, the supernal linguistics outside his own history, then something of his former selves returns. A restlessness speaking inaudibly of something antipodian to selflessness, by a syntax that can never know self. And it feels good. Previously, caffeine would have gotten the blame for his restlessness, hence the quitting, the cold turkey, week 0, day 6, the smell of Anastair's coffee, an enduring torture, suffering, a mixture of existence and memory, negation making things easier. True negation is impossible if he still would quit. But oh, the inconvenience of delight. Desire's infection, at least tonight. The headache's gone for good. And anyway, this sleeplessness had nothing to do with so easy a causal chemical effect. Curiously, it is the very thing that made Anwar, be sure, vaguely, sleepy all day. Often when he's not at his workstation, he can tell, as can Astaire and Xanther, and probably even Shasta and Freya, how by the sluggishness of his responses and actions, his mind labors elsewhere on some computational puzzle, or puzzles, background processing, not all even necessarily computationally. Not that this description has ever suited Astaire, who will caution him about applying metaphors of current data organization and processing to the life of synaptic nets, which Anwar had countered by asserting that information technology may soon no longer approximate those cerebral mysteries, but equal, if not surpass them. How many other people have these dialogues? Anyone? After which both agreed, especially under the pressure of daily duties, to shelve considerations of dissolutions inherent in comparative reasoning or analysis by analog. What happens to a metaphor when it ceases to become a metaphor but the thing itself, or actualizes the metaphor, or even inverts it? At least until the car was serviced or the children bathed and calls returned. All the while, Anwar's mind continued to negotiate and renegotiate alternative strategies or decision branches in today's case on a debugging assignment on Enzio's Catalyst 1.
Cat just notices that. Silly thing to notice. As if there's a relation. Is there? Silly. Or cat file.txt, file2.txt greater than file3.txt. Where, what? File1.txt equals s and file2.txt equals z. At least, beyond all that here, a sense of relief as Anwar readies to, again, bring the problem into relief. Most important of all, beyond understood variables and limited results, formulate a clear question. Something Anwar keeps trying to impress on Xanther in to handle her proliferation of curiosities. Make it lucid. Make it sharp. On this, he and Astaire are in agreement, whether in psychotherapy or programming. The quality of the results is proportionate to the precision of the inquiry. What Anwar does not say in any way have now. If Z knows all possible movements of S, if S knows all possible responses of Z, how does Z anticipate S's next move? Talk about if he wasn't just mimicking behavior. A huge decision tree, overfitting trees, needing all kinds of pruning algorithms. Anwar doesn't really know forests. In other words, nothing at all to do with the Enzio assignment. Catalyst 1 had been on ice for who knows how long, and the company wanted to take another look. The trouble was that it was a broken build, a release build on top of it, that wouldn't even load. Maybe engineers on Talbot's or Estetium's level could instrument the code quickly. Anwar, however, has found the problem more than just frustrating or time-consuming. He still remains stumped by how to effectively proceed, not that he has a choice. He, his family, needs the 9,000 now more than ever. And yet, a bird in hand is better than two in the bush, much better than one bird in the bush, much better than 150K bird that's no longer even close to said proverbial bush. And yet, Anwar finds himself letting go of the bird in hand. Why suddenly all this business about birds? Because, while for the moment Pio might be dead, Anwar can't get away from another glitch, not even this afternoon's glitch, but one he anticipated days ago, because there must always be glitches, especially where paradise is concerned, whether open or closed, to where Anwar turns now.
Despite present success, Anwar's MET module remains rickety because the AIM creation tool he put together keeps producing inconsistent logic. Just last month, Xanther had inadvertently drawn attention to just how skittish by requesting an intelligible explanation of the anticipatory interference model. First, what it does not address, Anwar began. It does not handle that which is reactive or simply part of the physics of the world. For example, the grass here. See how it reacts to our movement through it? In fact, this was all pre-scripted animation, but that was beside the point. The grass, however, does not anticipate the wind and bend first. Play it again, Freya had squealed. Again! That grass is so green, Shastia joined in. Okay, Xanther, not squeezing. Please now an example not in the knot. How Anwar adored Xanther's keenness. In this scenario, keystrokes, grass, vanishing, polygon creature Z hunts polygon creature S. Z observes S moving in a specific direction, yet in order to effect an encounter, must anticipate where creature S isn't now, but will be in a few moments. The twins, faced with just a block skittering across the screen after another crude shape, without the lush renderings of photo-extracted foliage and sky, promptly moved on to other rooms and pursuits. Xanther, though, stuck with it. Simple enough. If what? If it's all, regular enough? If speeds and directions remain constant, correct. But what if they're not? Then you, have to watch where or how they're not constant. Go on. If S is, changing speeds and maybe going faster than slower, somehow you have to figure that in? Beautiful. What if observation is out? Huh? Right now, Z observes S, but if some obstruction were to lie between them, sufficiently opaque to climb and eliminate any line of sight, say a fence or wall, how would Z know whether or not S is continuing along the last observed path or doubling back? Guess? Exactly. How? Xanther had shrugged, and Anwar had laughed. Z must mind read, silly. Dad, Xanther protested. Now you're being silly. A little, but not really. I'm not implying something extrasensory. What I mean by mind read is that Z must imagine how S thinks in order to understand how S will move. A computer can do that? Beautifully observed, daughter. Let's say there are ways to cheat. But that's not fair, right? I mean, it's cheating. Since designers, in essence, know and control the limits to all scenarios and have quantified those environments. Quantified, do you know that word? Like quantity? Excellent. So, as the computer knows all quantities involving these prescriptive interactions, that information can be used to mimic anticipatory actions. In other words, S knows everything Z will do, just as Z already knows everything S will do. Even every possible could do reduces definitely to what S will do, and therefore Z can and will reach S at, say, point Y before S, or even Z for that matter, knows it's even going to point Y. Poor S indeed, and S was the problem, which came down to MET and AIM and the way too many indeterminate forms they in collusion kept offering up to the compiler. So Anwar returns to point them, or really line them, with really no lines at all, where, for the first 40 minutes, most of his thoughts head toward one who could probably do this in his sleep if he stayed. The next 20 minutes, though, thank you, Tim Towdy, TMTOWTDI, or there's more than one way to do it. proved less extensively abysmal. Upon understanding 3 internal functions, Anwar fairly easily writes out 14 lines, almost a sonnet, though with no heart.
Anwar rechecks his work and invokes the computer. Down in the kitchen, Anwar pours himself a glass of water. Afterwards, he passes through the breakfast nook, then the dining family room, considers his piano at the French doors, curtains hanging perfectly still like they were marble, but could move at any moment, before turning west to slip through the living room with its cavernous fireplace, Astaire's glass wolves always at war on the mantelpiece, before heading back to his office, a leisurely domestic circuit to somehow ease his mind by reestablishing reassuring place. Compiling complete. Anwar, glass still in hand, starts the program. Polygon.dom again. No errors. S reaches Y. But where is Z? It's the only reminder Anwar needs. After all, he just walked the entire house, even stood in the kitchen, stood in their mudroom, but feared, to peer over that plywood barrier where earlier that evening he had explained to Xanther the necessity of such reinforcements because who knew what dangerous traps lay in wait nearby, gaps behind the stove and refrigerator, broken floorboards beneath some couch or table, even a frayed powered cord or shoddy outlet perhaps. Theirs was a dilapidated maze.
How thoroughly have we considered this house through its eyes? Mind reading? She had asked then, looking up at him with those wide, astonishing eyes, one azure, the other hazel, both shot through with sparkles of green and gold, each wing with a blue to black rival black. His love for her then, again, so enormous Anwar could only, without smile, nod.
Anwar goes back downstairs. No guest, especially one so tiny and insignificant, will put off this inspection, though Anwar still shudders with the approach. No need to recall the hissing recriminations he and Astaire had exchanged.
What about our 5-minute rule? What's been in the house less than 5 minutes can be thrown out in 5 minutes. 5 minutes, Astaire? She's had it all afternoon. Are you okay? No, I'm not. Did you think about disease? The vet told me it's unlikely to live more than a few hours, maybe not even 5 more minutes. Oh, honey, this was supposed to be a future, not more dying. You and I know supposed to be is a tricky guarantee. Darling, let's see what morning brings. I'm not bearing it. Let's see what morning brings.
Is that what sets Anwar on edge now? What he fears await him? A perfect stillness? Something moves and Anwar jumps, or at least he thought he jumped, or thought he heard something. Even as the sound rustling seems to continue, behind him, just at the entry to the kitchen opposite the pantry, faint but plausible, even if there's nothing visible. Within the wall, then, that scratching? There behind paint, drywall, and studs. Anwar edges closer, his ear not far from the family corkboard. Has something now, in there, started listening for him? Or even something? Things? Who can tell? It's there already scurrying away. Was that actually a scurry? More than a scratching, that rustling? A confirmation denied by everything but the possibility contained in the faint sense of hollowness and passage beyond? All this could just have easily been nerves combined with his ear brushing the latest pinned receipt, Jackson Bones' large nest. WTF? $250.69? Which Anwar isn't believing. Forget ears when he can't even trust his eyes. Did Astaire really pay that much for a doggy bed? Of course, if it turns out they do need an exterminator, they definitely can't afford one now. If he asked, Kosignicki would only remind Anwar, rightfully too, of the terms on the lease. Pay me monthly what this house is worth, and then I'll cover exterminators, gardeners, even a valet. Still, the last thing they need now is an infestation of rodents, and Anwar seriously doubts that the proverbial proclivities of Xanther's acquisition, should it survive, will be any match for a swarm of rats, a ridiculous Tom and Jerry moment that at least draws Anwar back to the plywood barrier, and all it retains and defends, if by thought alone. That, what kind of? Stillness? Because now there really is something peculiar, something Anwar doesn't want to see, but will. The ridiculous dog bed, piled high with towels, with, in the middle, the Nona T-Drive box filled with more towels. Perfect comfort. Only... If only Anwar had found sleep, stayed in bed. If only making love with his wife of 12 years had led to both. Anwar tries not to get antsy. No rash conclusions. Of course, he's overdoing things again. At least there's no corpse, though that might have been easier all around, easier for a stare, a quick flush, heartbreak for breakfast, Akita for dinner. Except, they can't forget, now they can't afford that Akita. No way a creature so minuscule, so weak, could have crawled out of here. A clear impossibility. Then rats? Suddenly those Tom and Jerry thoughts return, though not so Tom and Jerry anymore. Black, oily shapes gnawing through plaster, driven by appetite pouring out of walls, descending on the helpless creature. The reality is so less graphic. Anwar sets down the empty box, his daughter's makeshift nest. Obviously, the day has arrived when identity has successfully tugged Xanther from the loyalty she has always demonstrated toward her parents. The good daughter, the first daughter, the dutiful daughter, the devoted daughter, now going her own way. Not that a little self-interest is a bad thing. Growing up, relinquishing violations, too burdensome to bear, or at least bear fairly. Surges of hormones too, her period. Boys, the world beyond parental devotions. Still, Xanther's insubordination strikes Anwar as unexpected. Even if, through the sting, Anwar also feels proud, possibly happy. Before bed, Xanther had shown all the signs of wreckage, bruises, bandages, scabs, histories of infliction, and yet she still glowed with delight, something he had not seen for a while, certainly not since Dove had died, in fact mostly seen following Dove's rare visits, and then only briefly. Tonight, though, something about her, something bright and excited, and maybe a little bit strange, had emerged and endured for a brief breath longer, many breaths, fresh and gaining.
The burnt stones of his childhood rise in his eyes, all that they were not, but were still conceived of beyond themselves. Not just Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, but Abu Ahul, the terrifying one. Out of silence, years, here she is suddenly. Egypt, his home and city and pride, mother of the world, fragments maybe, fractals, three, and that fourth, not a pyramid? The pyramids he has no need to see now, which once, only once, up close, Anwar had seen past busloads of sunglassed tourists, those satisfied with their exposures in posters and postcards. Anwar holding tightly, he remembers, the hands of his parents, very tightly, both of them wordless before the diminishing red sun, monuments in themselves, dear Fatima, dear Shednuda, telling him before such tunes that here was where he came from. Here was what mattered, but what mattered most was everything he had yet to become.
Anwar rubs his eyes and smiles, relieves his knees from this squat. He knows he cannot avail himself to an I am surprised defense. How could he? Xanther's natural alliances to the natural are no mystery. Hadn't he just spotted her outside stroking the air? Tiny strokes upon nothing, or a nothing that something sometimes glistened so slightly it nearly defied belief. He'd watched her for a while before giving up any delusion that he knew what the blazes she was doing.
She had beamed at his question as if she'd never heard anything sillier. Petting Adeline, of course. And there it suddenly was. The web. And there, too, a submissive dark dot, afloat in the earthy air.
His daughter, petting a spider, even giving it a name. What does one do with that? There was only one problem with his current solution and satisfaction, the house itself. Didn't the immense level of deterioration here make of every step, no matter where, a thump and thunder to rival Stravinsky's Rite of Spring? A light sleeper anyway, Anwar can always hear everything going on in their home, and wakes whenever a toilet flushes or a creak slices down the hall announcing an adventure or nightmare in need of comfort by one of the intrepid twins. To make matters worse, tonight he hadn't even fallen asleep. And so now another thought threatens him, and with it another sound, how and why the rustling of a potential rodent or preposterous deceit could tickle his ear, and perhaps too the reason why the house's song has at this moment come upon him so vividly. The storm has stopped. The hammering flood, along with even the faint static of drizzle, gone. Silence reigns, and has reigned here for some time. Which is when, for an instant, even more vehemently than before, Anwar insists that he must have missed her footsteps. A desperate attempt. Xanther is an absurdly ill-coordinated creature. Even when obliging Astaire to practice Tai Chi, Xanther's footfalls threaten floorboards. Could Xanther have really made it all the way to the kitchen, gathered up her find, and then crept back upstairs without the house alerting him? Possibly, with an unlikely maybe. Unlikely, with almost certainty. Anwar doesn't want unlikely. Because what he fears most now is the impossible. The fear, in fact, is so great he almost can't leave his station beside the Jackson bones. He wants to stay where the invisible suggestion of rats or a disobedient child has chosen to remain. He doesn't want to climb the stairs. He doesn't want to look in on Xanther. He's afraid of what he'll find.
Daddy! Xanther had screamed. She had found him. Door, driver's side, ripped open. Out of nowhere. Arms thrust out to him. Covered in blood. Still screaming. Save him! At first, Anwar had no idea what Xanther had handed him. He only knew the way her voice resounded within, something about a cry in the storm, something about a last breath, something about drowning. Going to drown! Possible to drown! Anwar's guts torquing, heart bashing away. Xanther's every expression knocking the wind out of him. Anwar will do anything for her. If only here was not her anything. From her hands to his, this stiff creature laid to rest upon his palms. White. Eyes pinched tight, sunk deep in its own insubstantial coat. First, Anwar eased the kitten on its side. So small it fit easily in the palm of his left hand. Then he tilted the poor animal's head towards the floor and with his right fingers pressed gently on top of the rib cage. Look, listen, feel. Vaguely coming back, both he and Astaire had taken a CPR class before Shasti and Freya were born. Nothing about animals, but Anwar remembered the key with infants was gentleness. Look, breathing, not even a small swell of the chest. Listen. Forget that. Anwar's ear nearly covered the entire creature, and even if he could ignore the outdoor racket, his own living alone, where the breath, movement, or pulse, especially his pulse, was louder than anything this thing might produce. Feel? Not the slightest movement tickled his palm or his fingertips. Even his cheek, held close to that tiny pink nose, sensed no kiss of life. So Anwar offered it his kiss, lips around the entire snout, followed by a mouthful of air. Too much, remember, just can damage the infant's lungs. Only the tiniest puff. And this time fingerprints detected the slightest rise. Anwar puffed again, the tiniest puff. And again the tiny chest rose, at least the airway was clear. Again and again. How many times though? Who knew for an animal 5, 6? Once every couple of seconds seemed right. And all the time Xanther's unceasing, relentless focus, crying, begging to restore what was in peril, what was already lost. And maybe for a moment Anwar believed he could succeed, even when he paused and felt the chest fail to rise, his patient puff still continuing, putting off the building barrage of warnings, hygiene, sanitation. Could kittens get rabies? And gutter water? Deal with that later, puff after puff after puff, chest rising, until, when he paused next, the chest not only failed to rise, but Anwar could not deny the stiffening in the limbs, their coldness.
What perfect stillness then?
This was not happening.
What else was happening?
This was going to be awful in so many ways.
so many ways.
Forget the dog they were supposed to bring home. Forget all he and Astera tried to keep from exposing Xanther to. And why? Because during one of those rare Los Angeles rainstorms in the middle of a drought in so many ways, so loud it drowned out the roar of fire trucks, police cars, and ambulances, civilization itself. His daughter had still, somehow, detected blocks away a mew no louder than a hummingbird's hiccup, the source of which she had then brought to him, all but dead, all but, begging him, imploring him to set right what no father, even the terrifying one, can set right. So, of course, Anwar didn't stop the tiny breaths and the tiny pushes, compressions. How could he? What was Xanther sitting right there? Because how could he, again, show her what he couldn't do? Show her that which she had saved was not saved, dreading so much her reactions, wails, shock, another seizure, not to mention every moment still to follow. What? Returning the thing to the gutter, the nearest trash bin? Presenting it to Astera for a backyard burial a family of raccoons would more than likely dig up later? 3 compressions, 1 breath. Even 5 compressions, 1 breath. All the breath he had left. And for what? Colder still, stiffer still. No matter what combination he tried, still incoherent right there in front of him. Dead. Dead. Actually, she brought it back from the dead. And only then, when Xanther had laid her gentle hand upon his shoulder, as if she were him and he was still only him, did Anwar realize that he too had not gotten over Arlington and all they had buried there together. Dead, dead, dead. And so, of course, Anwar had wanted to save something, needed to save something, especially something this simple, this innocent, this inconsequential. And the tears flooding down his face had surprised him almost as much as the calm way Xanther had asked to try too.
Upstairs, Anwar listens to Shasti and Freya breathe and sputter in their dreams. When he moves on towards Xanther's room, the house announces his steps with a chorus of sustained cracks and groans. Maybe not Stravinsky, more like Perez. All perfectly familiar. Xanther's ceiling pricked with green light, bureau to curtains to closet thick with shadow. Her small desk also draped in shadow. And tacked somewhere above it, amidst pictures of skateboards and rock bands, Your Chemical Romance, a napkin inscribed by his own hand with 7 indeterminate forms. 0 divided by 0, infinity divided by infinity, 0 times infinity, 1 to the power of infinity, 0 to the power of 0, infinity to the power of 0, infinity subtracted by infinity. And as much as all, Anwar, again and again, knows he must fail to see what we must all fail to see. What he does succeed in seeing now does not surprise him. Los Angeles, California, May 10th, 2014, 23:10:59.